Government drama llama ding dong talking about the Berlin Wall. With the center going up super fast in Florida, it suddenly reminded me of something else that went up basically overnight. The Berlin Wall separated East and West Berlin from 1961 to 1989. It included guard towers placed along large concrete walls accompanied by a wide area later known as the Unaliving Strip that contained anti-vehicle trenches, beds of nails, and other defenses. I also want to highlight the last sentence here. The primary intention for the wall's construction was to prevent East German citizens from fleeing to the west. There's a few different reasons why the wall was put up, but I'm just going to try and keep it simple here. After the Second World kerfuffle, there was 4 occupying forces in Berlin. There was the United Kingdom, United States, France, and the Soviet Union. Long story short, the Soviet Union didn't really agree with the other powers on what to do after the whole kerfuffle, and they decided to take their toys and go home. Before the wall was put up, there were a lot of people that moved from the east to the west side. When the barrier went up, it went up fast. At midnight, the police and units of the East German Army began to close the border, and by Sunday morning, on August 13th, the border with West Berlin was closed. East Berlin troops and workers had begun to tear up streets running alongside the border to make them impassable to most vehicles and install barbed wire entanglements and fences along the 97-mile across the 3 sectors. August 13th became commonly referred to as Barbed Wire Sunday in Germany. Overnight, family and friends were split apart. As time went on, they fortified this border and made it more of the actual wall that most of us are familiar with. It became this physical image of the Iron Curtain and the separation between the East and West. The first concrete elements and large blocks being put in place on August 17th, 4 days after they started. During the construction of the wall, National People's Army and combat groups of the working class soldiers stood in front of it with orders to unalive anyone who attempted to defect. Additionally, chain fences, walls, minefields, and other obstacles were installed along the length of East Germany's western border and with West Germany proper. A wide no man's land was cleared as well to provide a better overview and clear line of fire at fleeing refugees. To give you an idea, this is what no man's land kind of looked like. In this one, you can see that on the western side, there's a lot of graffiti and there's a huge space between them and the east. A lot of people on the east had a lot of difficulty and were just trying to survive. Part of the reason this was called no man's land is because nobody was supposed to be there. It was 300 feet wide, and that's where they had all of this stuff in place. There are many accounts of people trying to escape to the west, and they're not pretty. Fletcher was yards away from Checkpoint Charlie, which is just one of a couple different checkpoints. Just yards and one infamous wall from a whole new life in the west. However, in the process, he was pew-pewed in the back, but his friends made it. Jarring photos show Fletcher crumbled at the foot of the concrete wall, basically being unalived with his back to the wall and the west, his head facing east. Many people on both sides of the barrier witnessed the tragedy that followed. The badly wounded young man was screaming loudly for help, but no reaction was taken for a long time on the East Berlin side. Standing on a ladder, West Berlin police officers asked him his name and threw bandages to him over the wall. However, West Berlin officers and the American soldiers nearby couldn't risk a much larger conflict by stepping over the wall to help the teen. The East German police didn't move to help the teen, who lay bleeding out on their side of the wall. He was there for 55 minutes before he was moved, and he wasn't exactly moved with much respect. At the point of this event, the wall had been up for a year. The official reasoning by the Soviets for constructing the wall was that it needed to keep the decadent, immoral Westerners out rather than to lock the right-thinking Easterners in. There were many people that protested this on both sides of the wall. He also wasn't the first one to be unalived. There were 23 before him. Even the guards on the east side were trying to escape, such as Hans-Dieter Wesse, who just 5 days after this occurred, didn't make it out. As far as the difference between the east and the west, there was definitely a difference in quality of life between the east and the west. Although the east called itself a democracy, the country was governed as a dictatorship. People in East Germany had no free elections, no freedom of speech or of the press, and no unrestricted freedom of travel. On the more positive side of things, there were a few different reasons as to why the wall eventually came down. One of those reasons being protests and demonstrations. Many East Germans took part in mass protests in cities such as Leipzig and demanded political reforms and freedom. If you're interested in different movies that show the contrast between East Berlin, one of them I would recommend is Goodbye Lenin. In this story, the mother was sick and I think in a coma during the time the wall fell, so the kids are aware that this is going on, but the mom is not, so in order to keep her from dealing with too much stress, they try to pretend that it is still East Berlin. If you've seen Sense8, the character Wolfgang Bogdanau has flashbacks to his childhood in East Berlin, and it is not pretty. Another one I'll add in is a film by Alfred Hitchcock that I don't see very many people talk about called Torn Curtain. What I like about this movie is it shows how paranoid everybody is because everybody is watching you and there's constant surveillance in East Berlin. You wouldn't know which people were working with the Stasi and who weren't. So not only is there the physical border, but within East Berlin, there's a lot of paranoia because you don't know who you can trust. If you have a plan to try and escape, you have to be extremely careful who you talk to because they might rat you out.